Have you ever considered that the one place you go to feel safe, your doctor's office, could be the very place where a chain of events is set in motion that does more harm than good? There is a quiet, unsettling truth that is almost never spoken aloud in the sterile, reassuring walls of a clinic. Each year, millions of people over 70 dutifully attend their health checkups, believing they are taking every precaution to safeguard their future, to extend their years of vitality and independence. They place their trust in the white coat, in the advanced machinery, and in the prevailing medical wisdom that more information is always better. But what if the script has been flipped? What if this relentless pursuit of information, this modern obsession with preemptive screening, has become a source of profound iatrogenic harm, a self-inflicted wound on the health of our elderly population? What if some of the most routine doctor-recommended tests are not a safety net, but a trap, a gilded cage of false reassurance that potentially pushes you towards risky, life-altering surgeries, debilitating strokes, or even the very cancer they are supposed to detect? This isn't baseless fear-mongering or a conspiratorial whisper. It's a reality buried deep within the pages of peer-reviewed scientific studies and medical journals, a conclusion that many frontline physicians grapple with in silence. Alarming new research reveals that a staggering 37% of all medical tests performed on seniors lead directly to what is known as a cascade of care, a domino effect of further testing, unnecessary treatments, unforeseen complications, or side effects that can haunt you for the rest of your life, diminishing its quality in the name of hypothetically extending its quantity. Even more shocking is the fact that an estimated 99% of people over the age of 70 have absolutely no idea they are being systematically over-tested and over-diagnosed, caught in a web of defensive medicine and for-profit healthcare incentives. One of these scans, a test marketed with glossy brochures as the ultimate preventive tool, is now believed to be a contributing cause in up to 5% of all cancer cases in the United States, a figure that puts it on par with the risk from drinking alcohol every single day. You will not see this information on a hospital brochure or a television commercial because the truth is inconvenient, unprofitable, and frankly, terrifying. It challenges the very foundation of modern preventive medicine. Today, we are pulling back the curtain to uncover it all, exploring the 5 health checkups that you should seriously question after the age of 70, and the terrifying reality of what they can do to your body. Bamkaf, the silent fear of the bone density scan. It seems utterly harmless, almost laughably simple, a mundane ritual in the landscape of modern medicine. You lie on a table for a few minutes, remaining perfectly still, while a silent, robotic arm passes over you. There are no needles, no injections, no claustrophobic tubes, and no pain. You leave with a piece of paper, a T-score that supposedly tells you the future of your skeleton, a numerical prophecy of your frailty. This is the bone density scan, or DEXA scan, and its stated purpose is to detect osteoporosis, a condition of brittle bones, before a catastrophic fracture occurs. But here is the secret that often gets lost in the clinical translation, the nuance that is smoothed over in a brief consultation. After age 70, this scan can inject a powerful and paralyzing dose of fear into your life with very little real measurable benefit. The machine measures the mineral content of your bones, but for older adults, particularly postmenopausal women, the results almost invariably show some degree of bone loss. This is often not a disease in the conventional sense, but a natural, expected part of the human aging process, as normal and predictable as wrinkles on your skin, the silver in your hair, or the fading of your eyesight. It is the physiological signature of a long life lived. The problem begins the moment this normal, age-related finding is pathologized and treated as a dangerous, urgent condition. Frightened by the clinical-sounding term osteopenia or osteoporosis and the stark numbers on a report, many seniors are quickly and reflexively prescribed powerful medications like bisphosphonates. These drugs, with brand names that promise strength and resilience, are designed to aggressively halt the natural process of bone remodeling, but they come with a dark and often downplayed side. They carry significant risks of severe esophageal irritation, agonizing musculoskeletal pain, and even osteonecrosis of the jaw, a rare but gruesome and irreversible condition where the jawbone literally begins to decay and die, making eating and speaking an ordeal. The most frustrating part of this entire paradigm is that for the vast majority of people with mild to moderate bone loss, the very people who make up the bulk of prescriptions, the evidence shows these medications barely move the needle on what actually matters, preventing the fractures themselves. One major, multi-year study published in a leading medical journal found that after 5 years of continuous treatment, these powerful drugs reduced the absolute risk of a hip fracture by a minuscule 0.3%. To put it another way, over 300 women had to take the drug for 5 years, enduring its costs and potential side effects, for one single fracture to be prevented. Instead of a life-saving intervention, patients were far more likely to experience debilitating digestive pain or, ironically, develop atypical femur fractures, where the thigh bone snaps under low stress because the drug has made the bone architecture too brittle and crystalline. A far better, safer, and more empowering path lies in a return to fundamental principles of biology and lifestyle. Proven, evidence-based strategies like progressive strength training, which creates mechanical stress that stimulates new bone growth, balance exercises like Tai Chi that directly prevent the falls that cause 95% of hip fractures, and ensuring adequate dietary intake of vitamin D and calcium have been shown to slash fracture rates by over 20% without any of the frightening side effects. Do not let a number on a screen scare you into a medical treatment you may not need, when the real, sustainable power to build stronger, more resilient bones already lies within your own control. The memory scan that creates more problems than it solves. As we age, a moment of forgetfulness, misplacing the car keys for the 3rd time in a week, struggling to retrieve a familiar name from the tip of the tongue, walking into a room and forgetting why, can trigger a deep, primal, and existential fear of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. This anxiety is one of the most profound fears of later life, the fear of losing one's own mind and identity. In response to this deeply personal anxiety, and often at the urging of concerned family members, doctors will frequently order a brain MRI. On the surface, it feels proactive, a decisive step towards getting definitive answers and taking control. But the uncomfortable and rarely discussed truth is that for mild, gradual memory concerns, a brain MRI is far more likely to create a cascade of new, intractable problems than it is to solve any existing ones. These incredibly powerful and detailed scans, capable of rendering the brain's delicate architecture in high resolution, will almost always find something abnormal in the brain of a person over 70. They show age-related changes, such as slight brain volume loss, atrophy, or small white matter spots, technically known as leukoariosis. These findings are, in the vast majority of cases, the neurological equivalent of gray hair or skin wrinkles, perfectly normal, incidental markers of the passage of time and the accumulated wear and tear of a long life. They are not, in and of themselves, a diagnosis of dementia. The profound danger lies not in the findings themselves, but in what happens next. Once these harmless, non-specific spots are flagged on a radiologist's report with intimidating medical jargon, they can set off a devastating cascade of fear, anxiety, and further, more invasive testing. A landmark 2021 study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association revealed a shocking statistic. While an overwhelming 86% of MRIs performed for mild cognitive issues showed some form of abnormality, only a tiny 3% of those findings were linked to a clinically significant and treatable condition, like a brain tumor or normal pressure hydrocephalus. This means that for a staggering 97% of people who underwent the scan, the procedure generated immense emotional distress, family turmoil, and medical uncertainty for absolutely no clinical reason. Worse still, the study found that nearly 12% of these individuals were pushed into highly invasive and risky follow-up procedures, such as spinal taps to analyze cerebrospinal fluid, or in extreme cases, exploratory brain biopsies based on these vague and non-specific MRI results. Imagine the story of George, a retired civil engineer who had always prided himself on his sharp analytical mind. Worried about his increasing forgetfulness and a few instances of word-finding difficulty, he underwent an MRI. The report mentioned age-related white matter ischemic changes, and despite his neurologist's cautious reassurance, George spiraled into a deep depression, convinced he had early-stage dementia. He preemptively surrendered his driver's license, quit his beloved woodworking group, and withdrew from his community, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of cognitive and social decline. Yet a simple office-based cognitive screening test administered months later showed his scores were still well within the normal range for his age and education. The MRI, the tool that was supposed to provide clarity, had instead stolen his confidence and his joy. Unless there are clear, red flag neurological symptoms such as seizures, a sudden and dramatic personality shift, or physical signs like a tremor or difficulty walking, a simple, non-invasive, paper and pencil cognitive screening test is a much safer, more effective, and more humane first step that avoids the immense risk of unnecessary panic and iatrogenic harm. Number 4. The heart test that can break your spirit and your kidneys. The cardiac stress test is one of the most common and widely accepted diagnostic procedures for seniors who report feeling a bit more tired than usual, a new shortness of breath on exertion, or a slight, vague tightness in their chest. The concept is straightforward and logical. Monitor the heart's electrical activity and blood flow under physical stress, either by having the patient walk on a treadmill at increasing inclines or by administering a medication that chemically simulates the effects of exercise to spot significantly blocked coronary arteries before they can cause a life-threatening heart attack. It is a cornerstone of modern cardiology. However, for people over the age of 70, particularly those without clear classic symptoms of active heart disease like crushing substernal chest pain, this test frequently backfires, doing demonstrably more harm than good. Its biggest, most fundamental flaw in this specific age group is its notoriously high rate of inaccuracy. Multiple large-scale studies have shown that the false positive rate, the frequency with which the test incorrectly signals a major life-threatening problem when there is none, can be as high as 40%. This means that nearly half the time, a healthy senior is told they may have a critical blockage. This single, terrifying, and often erroneous piece of information can launch a patient onto a medical conveyor belt from which it is nearly impossible to disembark. A positive stress test almost automatically leads to a follow-up test like a cardiac catheterization and angiogram, a highly invasive procedure where a catheter is threaded from an artery in the wrist or groin all the way into the heart, and a contrast dye is injected to visualize the arteries. This procedure is not without its own serious risks, including stroke, heart attack, or bleeding at the insertion site. More often than not, this journey culminates in an unnecessary interventional procedure, like the placement of one or more coronary stents to prop open arteries that may have only mild or moderate blockages that were, posing no immediate threat. A landmark clinical trial, the COURAGE trial, and its subsequent follow-ups discovered that, for patients with stable coronary artery disease, the placement of stents provided no improvement in survival or prevention of future heart attacks compared to optimal medical therapy with drugs alone. What these overdiagnosed patients did get were higher rates of bleeding complications from the antiplatelet drugs they now had to take, kidney damage from the toxic contrast dyes used during the procedure, and long, draining, and psychologically taxing hospital stays. Consider Raymond, an active 75-year-old retired postman who loved his daily long walks, but mentioned to his doctor that he was feeling a bit more tired on the steep hills. A just to be sure stress test came back abnormal. This led to a catheterization, the placement of a stent in a 60% blocked artery, and a severe allergic reaction to the contrast dye that landed him in the hospital for 6 days with acute kidney injury. His kidney function never fully recovered, and his fatigue never improved because it was ultimately discovered that it wasn't a heart issue at all. He was simply chronically dehydrated and slightly anemic. For seniors without obvious severe cardiac symptoms, safer, less invasive, and more informative alternatives like a simple resting electrocardiogram, EKG, or a coronary artery calcium (CAC) scan can provide invaluable information about long-term risk without the high probability of being pushed into a dangerous, costly, and unnecessary procedural cascade. But Owasawa rethinking the gold standard after 75. The colonoscopy is hailed by gastroenterologists and public health campaigns alike as the undisputed gold standard for preventing colorectal cancer, and for many years it has saved countless lives through the detection and removal of precancerous polyps. Because of this stellar and well-deserved reputation, it is difficult for both patients and many physicians to imagine a scenario in which this procedure could ever be a bad idea. It is ingrained in our medical culture as an unassailable good. But the science and the data are clear. After age 70, and especially after age 75, the delicate risk-to-benefit calculation for routine screening colonoscopy changes dramatically, and for many, it tips decisively towards the side of potential harm. For older adults, the procedure itself, from preparation to recovery, becomes increasingly hazardous. The preparation phase is notoriously brutal, involving several days of a restrictive liquid diet and the consumption of powerful, high-volume laxatives that are designed to completely purge the bowels. For a younger person, this is an unpleasant inconvenience. For an older person, it can easily cause dangerous dehydration and severe electrolyte imbalances, particularly in sodium and potassium levels. These disturbances can lead to dizziness, confusion, fainting, falls that result in fractures, and even life-threatening cardiac arrhythmias or acute kidney failure. The sedation required for the procedure also carries a greater risk to an older person's brain function. While generally safe, anesthesia can sometimes trigger a prolonged state of postoperative delirium or a more lasting cognitive decline in vulnerable elderly patients. Most importantly, the invasive part of the procedure, the insertion and navigation of the colonoscope, has a significantly higher rate of serious complications in seniors. The walls of the colon can become thinner and more fragile with age, and the presence of diverticulosis, small pouches in the colon wall, creates weak spots, increasing the risk of severe bleeding or a perforation, a tear in the colon wall, which is a life-threatening medical emergency requiring immediate major surgery. A massive definitive study of over 1.3 million Medicare patients published in the Annals of Internal Medicine made a sobering and practice-changing discovery. For every 1,000 colonoscopies performed on people over the age of 75 for routine screening, only 1 to 2 lives were saved from colon cancer over the following decade. During that same period, however, over 20 people in that group suffered a serious, life-altering complication from the procedure itself. That's a staggering and undeniable 10-to-1 ratio of significant harm to potential benefit. Consider the story of Dana, a vibrant 73-year-old grandmother who was an avid gardener and ballroom dancer. She was urged by a new young primary care doctor to get a routine colonoscopy despite having no symptoms and a history of clean exams every 10 years. During the procedure, a small benign polyp was removed. That night, she collapsed at home in excruciating abdominal pain from a delayed bowel perforation. This led to emergency surgery, a colostomy bag, and a 9-day hospital stay that left her frail, deconditioned, and forever changed. For most healthy adults over the age of 75 with a history of negative screenings, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, the leading authority on preventive medicine, explicitly recommends stopping routine screening. A much safer, completely non-invasive, and highly effective alternative like a stool-based FIT, fecal immunochemical test, which can be done from the privacy of home, is often a far wiser and more patient-centered choice. Bisschen the most, Dangerous checkup of all, the full body scan. We have now arrived at the most egregious, misleading, and potentially harmful checkup offered to seniors, the full body CT scan. These scans are rarely ordered by responsible physicians, but are often marketed directly to consumers in high-end executive health packages or at standalone imaging centers, sold with the alluring and seductive promise of catching cancer or silent disease at its earliest possible stage. The shocking truth is that these scans represent a radiological nightmare, exposing a person's entire body to an immense and damaging dose of ionizing radiation with zero credible scientific evidence that they save lives or improve health outcomes in asymptomatic people. A single full-body CT scan can deliver a radiation dose equivalent to approximately 500 standard chest X-rays, or the amount of background radiation one would absorb naturally over several years. A recent, terrifying modeling study presented at the Radiological Society of North America concluded that the ongoing explosion in the use of CT scans for screening and diagnosis may now be responsible for up to 5% of all future cancers in the country, meaning that 1 in every 20 cancer cases could be iatrogenically triggered by a scan that was meant to prevent it. This risk is cumulative and is particularly pronounced in organs that are highly sensitive to radiation. The profound danger of these scans, however, is not just the radiation, it is their terrifying and almost guaranteed ability to find incidentalomas, a clinical term for harmless incidental findings like benign nodules, simple cysts, and age-related calcifications that are simply signs of a body that has lived a long and full life. But the moment these incidentalomas appear on a high-resolution screen, a red flag goes up, triggering a frenzied and often unstoppable cascade of more focused scans, more radiation, more specialist consultations, and ultimately invasive and risky needle biopsies to prove that they are harmless. Imagine Marcus, an 80-year-old who still taught martial arts twice a week. He felt perfectly healthy but was convinced by his children to invest in a senior elite health checkup that included a full-body scan. The scan found a tiny 3mm nodule in his lung. This single insignificant finding set off a chain reaction of pulmonologist visits, a high-radiation PT scan to assess the nodule's metabolic activity, and finally, a transthoracic needle biopsy to get a tissue sample. The final result was, as is the case in over 98% of such small nodules, benign. It was a simple scar, but the biopsy procedure itself collapsed his lung, a common complication called a pneumothorax, requiring a chest tube and a 2-month recovery that robbed him of his strength and his ability to teach. He was grievously harmed not by a disease, but by the relentless and misguided search for one. Every major medical body in the world, including the American College of Radiology and the American College of Physicians, is unequivocal in its guidance. Full-body CT scans should never be used for general, asymptomatic screening. It is the medical equivalent of searching for a needle in a haystack with a bulldozer. You might, on the rarest of occasions, find the needle, but you will almost certainly destroy the haystack in the process. The smartest, wisest, and safest approach to health in your later years is to turn away from fear-based, technology-driven screening and instead listen to your body. Cultivate a partnership with a thoughtful doctor you trust, and only pursue tests that are clearly indicated by your actual symptoms and personal history. Your health, your peace of mind, and your quality of life are far too precious to be gambled away on screenings that can leave you physically and emotionally broken.